Hey guys, it's Katie at scrappinkaty.ctmh.com, and I have a slimline card to share with you today using the Creativity in Motion special that's going on right now on my website until the end of September 2020. Now, this special is fun and funky, but I wanted to show you a different take on the special. So here's a look at the flyer and the instructions. You can see right here, it's very whimsical, fun. I just love those little animals there. And then you've got some sentiments. And on the back of this flyer, it does tell you how to put it together. So if you were to order it and get this in, it would be pretty seamless. There are some tips and tricks, but you do need the stitched rectangular die. I'm going to show you how to do it without that thin cut. And then we are going to use these two stamp sets. And then you can see right here, you can purchase all of these things a la carte or as a big, huge bundle. We're also going to use those animation sheets. Now, for this card to work, you do have to have those animation sheets, which is just acetate with some black lines on it. So again, here's a look at the stamp sets we're going to use, which are Butterfly Kisses, and then the Animated Sentiments. And then I've also pulled out the stamp set that goes with Bloom and Grace called With a Thankful Heart, and we're going to throw that in there as well. So this is going to be a slimline card. I'm using some patterned paper from a mix-in that retired at the end of August, but you can still find it on my website, and I'll leave the link down below. I've also pulled a piece of 12 by 12 Canary Cardstock that I'm going to cut my base for my card. So I've cut it at 8 inches, and then I'm turning that clockwise and then cutting at 7 inches. And then once I score that, that will be the slimline base. Now this pattern paper, I do want a little bit of an edge. So I'm cutting it at 3 1/4, and then it was already 7 3/4 inch long. So I'm going to show you how to do this without having the stitched rectangle. Now we want a 1/4 inch border. So you're going to line your blade up at a 1/4 inch and cut up until there's a 1/4 inch left. Turn the paper sideways. Now make sure that left edge is sitting at that 1/4 inch mark. Start your blade at a 1/4 inch and cut up until there's a 1/4 inch left. And you're just going to keep rotating that piece of paper until you've cut a 1/4 inch frame all the way around and that center piece pops out. So again, lining it up at a 1/4 inch, cutting from a 1/4 inch up to a 1/4 inch left. That center pops out, and now we have our frame. So now I'm going to take those animation sheets. Now I want the stripes going up and down. That's what makes the animation work. So I'm going to put this in my cutter at 3 1/4, or just shy of 3 1/4, and turn it sideways, and I want it at just shy of 7 3/4. And that way it fits nicely behind that frame that we just cut. So I'm going to go ahead and score my piece. On the 7-inch side, I want to score this base at 3 1/2 inches. And that gives me a slimline card that will measure 3 1/2 by 8. Now for that panel, I need a piece of white Daisy cardstock. Now I want my cardstock to fit inside that frame. And then I want it long enough that I can use those border thin cuts to cut that pull tab. So I am just cutting this. It ends up to be just about 2 3/4 inch. I'm going to go ahead and cut it just shy of that. It's always easier to cut more off than cut it too skinny and it kind of wobble around in there, if you know what I mean. So I'm going to create kind of a random stamped border at the bottom of this pullout with the sunflower piece. And then I am also going to pull out a sponge dauber and some toffee ink and just sponge that toffee ink on the center of that sunflower. I'm going to repeat this process 3 or 4 more times and just kind of stamp along the bottom. Now, the sentiment that I'm going to be using is the Happy Birthday from the Animated Sentiments, and it is rather large because it's stacked. So I want to make sure that my sunflowers do not prohibit me from stamping that sentiment on that panel. So now I'm going to pull out one of the leaves that comes with that, with the Thankful Heart stamp set. And I've got my fern ink, and I'm just stamping those along the side and along the bottom. And then I'm going to take my espresso ink, and this is what I'm going to use to ink up the sentiment as well as the dragonfly. So I've got my happy birthday, and I'm going to put that on a block and then ink that up in the espresso ink. Now you could use a color ink, but I just find that darker colors work really well with those animation sheets. Now for this to work, you want to make sure that those lines are pretty much straight up and down. And then same thing with that dragonfly from the Butterfly Kisses stamp set. So I'm going to find me a block and put that little guy on there and then ink that up. Now for the dragonfly, I have to make sure that the lines of his wings are also going straight up and down, and that way he will move behind those animation sheets as well. So I'm pretty happy with how that turned out, and now I'm going to pull out those tabs and the thin cuts and kind of line that up along the top. Now another thing you want to keep in mind is that you want the pull tab sticking out, but you don't want to cut off too much. So I could have put this a little taller or a little more to the right, and then if it didn't work out, I could always trim that left side off, if that makes sense. So I am happy with that. I am going to go ahead and stamp pull here. Now there is a stamp set that also comes with this special, or you can buy it a la carte, and it's just got various sentiments that basically are telling the recipient, hey, pull here, slide. There's just various little words that kind of let the recipient know that there is some interaction to this card. So I'm going to take my clear shimmer brush, and I'm just going to use some watercolor pencil first to color those leaves. And then I am just adding some shimmer to the center of the sunflowers, and then using that shimmer brush to kind of color out that watercolor pencil. I know you can see that shimmer there. I was going to say if you can't, then wait till the end, but you definitely can see that shimmer on those sunflowers. So right here, much like a shaker panel, you need that animation sheet adhered to the back side of that frame. And I love to use liquid glass. It's very strong adhesive, and it's also pretty quick drying. So I'm just laying my animation sheet down. You want to make sure that you do not use too much liquid adhesive, because you don't want that liquid adhesive oozing out and getting on this acetate, because it just kind of adds a dull finish, and you can definitely tell that there's glue somewhere where it shouldn't. Now to make this work also, there has to be a little bit of dimension in this frame. I am using some thin 3D foam tape from Close to My Heart, and I love it because the width is thin, and then also it's not very, I guess, high. So it's just a little bit of dimension. And so I've added that on 3 sides. Now you only want to do 3 sides because you want that pull out to come from that 4th side that has no adhesive on it. So I am happy with that. I'm going to pull the backing off of this thin 3D foam tape. And if you've never used this tape, we have regular depth, and then we also have the thin. I'll leave links down below. I just love it. And I just adhered that to the card front. Now my sentiment piece is a little bit too wide. Remember I told you that it's best to keep it wide and then trim off what you need to trim off instead of having it just kind of swim around in that little frame. So I'm just trimming off just a little bit, and then I'm going to insert it again and see how this looks. So here is a look. Now look at that magic. Isn't that fun? So now I'm going to want to stamp a sunflower and add it to the outside of the card. So I'm just going to take those thin cuts and do that off camera. I've got 1 of the sunflowers and 2 of the leaves. And then I'm going to take that same sunflower stamp set that we used on the bottom of the pull-out piece, and I'm going to ink that up in the same manner that I did with the canary ink, and then take that toffee with the sponge dauber and do the center of the flower. Now there are some telltale leaves on the sunflower that allow it to line up perfectly. And so I'm just lining those up, stamping that off, and then I'm also going to ink up this leaf in that fern ink and then stamp down on these little cutouts. So I've got that done, and then I'm going to color them in much like I did on the leaves from the pullout, and then use my shimmer brush to watercolor those out. I just love using my shimmer brush for the watercolor. It just adds that extra shimmer, and it really accomplishes the same thing. So I'm going to add a little thin 3D foam circle in that little corner and then attach my sunflower. And then I'm going to use liquid glass to adhere these leaves. Now, liquid glass, again, it dries fast and it's going to allow that to stick to that acetate. You just want to make sure you're using an adhesive that will stick to the acetate. And that is that cute little animated card. Isn't it so cute and sweet? So for the inside, I am pulling out some of the pattern paper from the Bloom with Grace. Now this is by far my favorite pattern. And I'm cutting a piece that's 1.5 by 8 inches and then applying some adhesive to the back there, and that will just go on the bottom of my card. Now since this is a birthday card, I'm going to pull out another stamp set. And then it's one of my favorite go-tos. It's called Celebrating You. It has a lot of birthday sentiments, different fonts, and then it just has this tiny little sentiment that says Celebrating You Today, and I'm going to ink that up in espresso ink, and then just stamp that down at the bottom right over that sunflower patterned paper. So I really like how that turned out. And then I do think that that sunflower needs just a little bit of something. So I have pulled out some of my a Traveling marker, and I'm just going to use 2 of the colors to just kind of build out that yellow around that center. I just love how this card turned out. Something that was supposed to be so animated and whimsical really turned out to be so elegant with the Bloom with Grace line. Now I'll leave a link down below for the Bloom with Grace, as well as the Creativity in Motion. Now that special is good until the end of September 2020. And I would love to have you comment and tell me if this is a card that you would love to receive or even give. And as always, I would love to have you subscribe and hit that notification button so you'll be alerted the next time I post a crafty video.